Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Parent Chat. We have an amazing speaker tonight, and I'm so thankful she's here because this topic that we're going to discuss should be top of mind for everybody. And we're going to talk about body confidence, something that we hear a lot of, but as parents, we're not exactly sure how to support this idea of body confidence in our kids. I know the title of this is teens, but the information we're talking about is really for all ages. And we can also learn a bit about how we talk about ourselves and how we honor our own bodies too. So tonight we have Abby Erickson, who has her own practice called Unfiltered Mental Health. I love that title. That's kind of what the Parent Chat is all about, right? Unfiltered. And so she's a licensed mental health counselor. She's really passionate about helping teens and young adults with disordered eating and body image concerns, anxiety, and self-esteem. Probably a lot of you are thinking, okay, great, this is exactly where I need to be tonight. You know, it's really difficult. She points out that it's hard to know how to talk to your teen about body image and eating habits, especially because many of us as adults struggle with those things. So she is going to talk about this, not just up at this level, she's going to bring it down to you in a way that you will have some ideas, some pointers on exactly how to talk to your kids about body confidence. All right, Abby, I'd love to invite you on screen and I'm going to have you take it away.
All right, so I'm going to try to figure out how to do the share screen thing again. 1 second.
As you do that, I'll remind everybody, Abby, if you have questions, we really encourage questions. We don't want to just talk at you. So if you have questions, put them in the Q&A box because that keeps them all nice and neat over on this side for us. And then in the chat box, chat away if you have comments about things. And then also we're going to be asking you some questions as we go too, and that will go into the chat box. You can always do it anonymously if you want to. If you look down at the bottom of your chat box, there's a little box that says everyone. Click on that and you can choose just to send it to hosted panelists. If you do that, we'll make sure that we are leaving you anonymous. All right, Abby, go ahead.
Cool. All right. Is this looking good, Sherry, on the other side?
It looks great.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so first we're coming in hot with a Q&A first off the bat. So first question is, when was the last time you said or thought something unkind about your own body?
I'll answer that one out loud. Today, I was thinking stuff and I was like, nope, not going to do that.
There you go.
Yeah, let's see. So we have yesterday. Today is me. Today.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes. And I imagine a few minutes ago.
Okay.
All right.
So we can notice that very recently, most of us have had those thoughts. I had one today too. And then the next question is, if anybody is comfortable sharing, or you can answer anonymously, does anybody want to share some variation of what that thought was? This is a deep one. It's an intense one.
And some of you may need to think about that. Go ahead, you can do that. And if it comes to you in a bit, you can throw it in there. So just ugh, I love that. Yeah, I feel you. Yeah, just ugh. Yep. I felt obese, my weight and height. Yeah, thinking about that.
Yeah, normal thoughts. We all have that stuff that comes in, probably much more frequently than we even notice because it's so pervasive and it's something that we are just so ingrained, to learn and think about ourselves. So it's not surprising at all to hear any of that. And I think it's just a useful kind of tool to be able to look back and wonder, like, okay, how often is this actually happening for me? And it's probably pretty frequently. So yeah. The next question is, how did that make you feel when you had that thought about yourself?
That's a good one.
Standard therapist question, right?
Yeah. And I'll read while people are putting that in some of the other comments. Someone was thinking how I used to look so good and not anymore. I gained all the weight I'd lost and now I feel less confident as I gained more weight since I faced some challenges. Yeah. They felt sad, defeated, a sense of loathing. I feel bad, annoyed because I know it isn't helpful thinking, inadequate. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. all of those, and it makes good sense because of what we're taught to associate with those things. So very true. Often what I hear are things like shame, guilt, embarrassed, sad, frustrated, which is a super fun way to start our Wednesday mornings, isn't it?
Yeah. Because it's usually in the mornings, right? When you're choosing your clothes and you're, taking a shower and all those things.
Yeah, and they make us feel crummy. So if we can see that our kids are struggling with this stuff and we're also struggling with it too, there are ways that we can help support them through it. And sometimes it's starting with ourselves and how we talk to ourselves. So last little bit of this part of the Q&A, it's rhetorical, but I am just wondering if we can start thinking about when we did, said, saw, made that facial expression, whatever happened in the mirror or reflection, or when that body conscious thing came up, did your kids see you do it? And it's okay if they did. It is just kind of a little nugget to be thinking about as we go through this. And we'll talk more about it later on. So thank you all for answering those questions. Okay, so Sherry, feel free to jump in and ask questions as we go through this. Has anybody heard of the term fat phobia? And Sherry, maybe I just ask you that first. Have you heard that term before?
Definitely. I've heard of that a lot. Yeah.
I'm hopeful most people are familiar, have at least like heard that language before. So this is another Q&A. I'm really diving into this. So when we see these two different words, thin and fat, what are some of the associations that come up with each of them? No judgments here. It's just our natural brains connecting these things based on what we've learned, what we've been told.
This is good. So why don't we start with thin and then we'll do fat so we can keep those kind of separated in the chat box. So what words come up for you when you think of thin? Weak. The ideal. Good looking. Athletic, skinny, anorexic, fit. Healthy, pretty, ideal, fit and healthy. Attractive. Fit. All right, those are the main words.
Cool.
Shall we do fat now?
Yes, please.
All right. Oh, here's a few more. Can eat anything, can wear anything and look good, happy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Yep. And then let's do fat.
Undesirable, unhealthy, sad, depressed, lazy, unhealthy, less attractive, gross in quotations, unhealthy, hate to shop for clothes, sloppy, stupid.
Yeah.
Less options for clothes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So if we can all just kind of take a second to go inward and just sort of sit with that, how different these words come up for us and all the things that we connect to them. In my presenter notes, I had this thing about what likely is going to be the associations, but everybody named all of them already. So I think we can pretty fairly say that in a nutshell, Western culture teaches us that thin is good and fat is bad. Right.
Mm-hmm. This is an interesting insight. Someone said, my daughter pointed out Disney shows fat people as evil. Yeah, think about the Little Mermaid, like Ursula and versus Ariel. Yeah. It
is villainized through media for forever and ever. It's been this way for a very long time. Through all sorts of forms of media. So absolutely, that daughter made a good point. She's right about that. So just something that we can be thinking about. All right, so the big bummer about this whole thing is that this whole fat phobic sort of mentality and that fat is bad, it's not actually, we can't guarantee that it's true. So there's an assumption that fatness equals unhealthy. And that's not actually something that we can verify just by looking at somebody. So kind of another Q&A, does anybody know where the BMI was originally developed from? The body mass index?
I did not know that. I used to, but I can't remember.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You don't necessarily need to ask this one, Chair, but just kind of thinking about it, right? So this is the measurement that's used in all current medical healthcare systems still to gauge whether or not if somebody can be determined to be healthy or not. But this is a 200-year-old measurement that was developed by a mathematician who wasn't even a doctor. He was hired by the government to come up with some sort of scale to use to allocate resources. And he said explicitly that it shouldn't be used as a measure of somebody's actual health. But somehow still in 2023, it's still the standard that we use. And this is where the words obese, overweight, morbidly obese come from. It's from the BMI, even though we don't have a lot of validity to suggest that it actually equates to health because it's such a small measure used by height and weight. So there's a lot of things that aren't accounted for, right? And I always think this representation is a good example of it because LeBron James would be considered overweight. So
most Olympic athletes would, they actually fall in that, maybe not runners, but a lot of them.
yeah.
I'm going to ask this question, Abby. I want to know from the parents who, when they go into the pediatrician, do they hand you that slip of the BMI or they tell you those numbers? I remember my pediatrician did, and I just got so frustrated with it. I would throw it away. My kids didn't want to see it. I don't want to see it. But I'd love to know that in the chat box. Just say, give a thumbs up or a yes if that's something you get at your pediatrician still. All right. Sorry, Abby. Didn't mean to interrupt. I'm just interested to know.
I'm glad you did. It's a good question.
Mostly yeses.
Yeah. Yeah. Still yeses coming in, I'm guessing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's still front and center for us as parents. And of course, that trickles down to our kids.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And so I guess next time LeBron James shows up with a hurt muscle, we should probably just tell him he needs to lose a few pounds.
Right. But that's a good thing that we can use to tell our kids, right? Like, don't just look at that number, look at LeBron James.
Right, absolutely. So this is something that I think is just necessary to at least honor. Some of the fat phobic stuff is rooted in racism, of course, like many of things. So we know that there is, for measurements of BMIs, if we're using that scale, which we still are today, Black women are in the highest BMI rate. And so if BMI is associated with health and there's all of this racism that's going on anyways, there's already this stigma that's created around larger bodies and particularly Black women. And so there is a book written about this, Fearing the Black Body, if anybody's interested in checking it out. But I just think it's important to note so we understand where some of this messaging originated and how harmful it really has been and can be and will continue to be for a lot of folks if we're not doing work as a society to kind of eradicate it and make it better. So yeah. Okay. So this is kind of like a representation of the problem with weight stigma. So what we know is that it is not so much our weight that is the big determinant of our health. It is mostly the stigma that is happening for people, because if we're being told all the time that we need to be a certain way and that if we're not, we suck, that leads to some crap. So it creates a lot of guilt and shame and anxiety, which creates stress on the body, which we know is absolutely terrible for our health. And then what do we do when we feel bad about ourselves? We cope however we can. And so if we have a kind of a proclivity to eating more when we're feeling stressed out, that's going to happen more often. And then we isolate. And we know what else is another indicator of longevity is loneliness. So we can get depressed. Depressed people typically have a harder time moving their bodies and caring much for their bodies in general. So it makes sense that the stigma itself is really the problem here, more so than anybody's weight and the numbers on the scale.
And Abby, it makes me, there's always a time when our kids they gain weight because they're about to shoot up, right? And yeah. So, for some kids, that happens like a couple of months. Others, they hold on to that weight for quite a while. So that's so difficult when they're in that moment. They can't just adore their bodies and understand that's part of nature, they start to go on diets, and that you're probably talking about this, but starts so young, and that's part of that weight gain, growth, all of that.
It absolutely is. I can't tell you how many teenagers I've had say that they wish that they had the prepubescent body when
Yeah.
they start going through puberty and everything. They want to look like they looked when they were 10 years old, and it's sad, because
Yeah.
our bodies are supposed to change. It's a good thing that they're growing. So yeah, that brings us into the super fun conversation of diet culture. I'm also really curious about who's familiar with this term, because I know it's gaining some traction out there, but I'm not positive how familiar people are with it. So I'd love to know. Have you heard the term diet culture? Is that
I
something?
definitely have. Someone is saying no. It's about half and half. Yes, yes, I am. No, yes, yes. I haven't heard it. No. It's like half and half for my answers so far.
Okay, that's a good thing to just gauge so I know how much to dive into this versus not. So diet culture is just kind of this blanket term that we're using for this thing that I will explain. So we know that diets don't work, and we have numbers for it now. So did y'all know that diets have a 95% fail rate? So what we know about this is it's not the people that fail the diets, it's the diets that fail the people, because it creates so much residual backlash for us physically, emotionally, and socially. Diets are the thing that start the yo-yo dieting, which decreases our metabolic rate and decreases our leptin levels, which is the hormone that regulates our metabolism with hunger and fullness cues. And then a whole lot of guilt and shame and food obsession comes with that. And yet, Western society is still riddled with diet culture. How come? Can you guess, Sherry? Does anybody know? I'll tell you. It's because it makes a lot of money.
Yeah.
So the diet industry is a $66 billion industry. So there's a lot of people who are profiting off of us not liking the way that we look, which is also very sad. It's very, very sad.
Yeah, and you can see that if you just watch TV for a while and actually get the ads like you're showing, they're constant.
Oh, yeah, it's never ending. And again, I think it's so fascinating because we're kind of conditioned not to even notice it so much or like see it as an issue, because it's just out there all the time, right? So this is what diet culture would look like. I do know that it's 2023, so these hard copy magazine covers have transformed into social media posts and ads, but it's all still there. With even more knowledge being shared about the harm of diet culture and the effectiveness of diets, the ineffectiveness of diets and intentional weight loss, the companies start to repackage the diets with different language. And so instead of calling it a diet to super duper lose weight, they'll say, oh, this is a wellness package, and this is a clean eating journey, and this is a lifestyle change for you. But really, it's all the same thing, just a different version of it that's more palatable for people. But it's the same kind of stuff. They don't work. They just don't.
And this is riddled for those of you who have kids on TikTok all over the place. And it's actually most of the kids who are talking about it are kids, and they're taking this and repackaging it and acting like they're the experts.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of scary. There is a question, Abby. You mentioned leptin. Can you also touch on ghrelin? I think that's how you say it, right? Ghrelin.
I cannot, because I am not a medical doctor. I wish
Okay,
I could.
okay.
You touch on that?
I cannot. So I'm not gonna say her name who asked it because you did it anonymously, but I'm so sorry. We cannot answer that question. We're not going to give you information that's not accurate. So I appreciate the question though.
And I'm sorry that I don't know that. I would be happy to find the answers once I actually talk to somebody who knows what they're talking about in the medical field with these things. So I do apologize for that, and can find it if you want me to, and get back to you about that, or let Sherry know. And
All right.
yeah.
She said, okay, she's letting us off the hook, but we may try to, in our follow-up email, maybe we'll put something in there if we can find something for you.
Perfect. That sounds great. Okay, so next, what does diet culture sound like? We talked about what it looks like. We're going to talk about what it sounds like. Okay. So I'll just let y'all have a minute to kind of read through some of these things.
Yeah, why don't we read them out loud, Abby? Do you want me to read them with you so you don't have to just read them all by yourself?
Actually, if you wouldn't mind, Sherry, because of my presenter view, I actually can't see the slide well enough.
Okay.
So if you want to That would be
I'll
helpful.
read them. I think it's just important that we hear them so that it resonates with us, you know? Okay, so oh my gosh, I was so good over the weekend talking about food. Good is the issue here. If I could lose 10 pounds, I would look so much better in this suit. Shh, I'm being so naughty eating this donut, don't tell. And that's one that I think we do with our kids a lot. I wish I had their body. What workout have you been doing? I'm trying to lose weight before that wedding. My friend tried the intermittent fasting and lost like 4 pounds. I wish I could do that. I'm not going to eat before we get there so I don't look fat. Have you lost weight? You look so good. You shouldn't eat that. It'll go straight to your thighs. I'd be so happy if I were just skinnier. I can't have dessert later. I'm being good today. It was so sad to see how, fill in the blank, let themselves go like that. I'm trying to lose weight so I'll be healthier. Do anybody relate to these? We've probably all said these in some form or fashion, right?
Mhm. Yeah, they hit a little harder, don't they? When we say them out loud with intention, knowing what we're talking about with it too. Yeah. Do you have likes coming in, Sherry, or any sort of?
Yeah, they are. I saw some thumbs are going up. Yeah, you guys feel free to use your reactions. That allows us to kind of see easier. But yeah, lots of thumbs up.
Oh, cool! I can see them floating in the corner
Yeah,
too.
I love the little floating thumbs up.
Good.
You know,
Okay.
this list, Abby, it really makes me think of one of my daughters was working as a waitress. And even in that setting, people would order stuff and they would say things like that. Oh, I'm being naughty today. I'm gonna go ahead and order the dessert, or oh, I'm gonna order the salad because I need to lose some weight. Or, you know, even in that setting, people felt so compelled to justify or to show how they were being quote good, even to a waitress.
Mhm. It is something, isn't it? It's really sad and so automatic for us because there's just like this walking assumption that somebody's always judging us for the decisions that we're making about our bodies. And it's not great. It just isn't great. So
Yeah.
we notice that this kind of chatter is so pervasive and it's internalized as normal, and we don't even realize how often we do it. What I always think is really interesting is like, this is very heteronormative, so I just want to put that out here. But if we're like sitting at a restaurant or something and you listen to a group of women talking about things, the likelihood that you'll hear them talking about something aesthetic, whether it be like, you know, shoes or their weight or their weight loss or their exercise or something like that, it's pretty high chance you'll overhear that conversation. Whereas like if you go over to a table of men and listen to what they're talking about, it's probably not going to be about that. You're probably not going to hear anybody talking about how naughty they were for eating one but two brownies before they put the kid to bed last night, right? It's just, there is some genderedness in it. We need to talk about men and eating disorders as well. There isn't nearly enough conversation about that because it does happen. But just wanting to point that out, you know, who traditionally these things have been targeted towards.
Although I think I have seen in adults definitely, but in the teens, I feel like it's kind of the boys are getting up there now because of TikTok and the diet culture and the workout culture, that there's more talk about that now than there used to be.
Yeah, absolutely. In teenagers, it is absolutely becoming less gendered and more of just everybody. I remember seeing, there was one like what do they call them? These like series that they do where everybody kind of repeats the same TikTok over and over again. And they were measuring like their headphones around their waists, trying to see who could wrap their headphones around their waists.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff is just glorified a lot. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's a bummer because I am an unabashed member of TikTok. I don't post, but I do consume and look and try to learn about things. And there are corners that are body positive and really good resources for some of this less weight focused, more like general health kind of things and stuff that I'll talk about later, but that really is inviting more body positivity for us. But they're harder to find because
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and the problem with the algorithms on TikTok and probably Facebook too, is that if you go to look up one of the body positive people, that algorithm sits next to all of the negative ones. So if your child actually is looking for that body positivity, gets that on their feed and their algorithm, unfortunately, those other things start going into.
Yep. That's absolutely true. I'll talk about this a little later, but I do have kind of a tip for that. I guess I can just say it now, but when you're going through any sort of social media, there's generally options to like report or hide an ad or suggestion for us. So we can say that they're not relevant for us, not appropriate, etc. And that can kind of bump the algorithm in the direction that we want to, but we have to be pretty intentional about it. So
Yeah.
it can be improved in that way, because you're right, Sherry, otherwise all the stuff just comes up automatically. Okay, so
we have a couple of comments. Let me read these real quick. My teenager is relating everything with calorie intake when he eats anything. And yes, the gym bro language fits in here. Yeah, the thigh gap for athletes, the pressure to put on weight or lose weight. Yeah.
it is a thing, isn't it? Absolutely. Okay. So it's kind of easy to minimize the impact of all of that messaging that we've been talking about by saying it's just a conversation or something that everybody talks about. And fair enough, there might be some folks who can hear that stuff without internalizing it, but for most of us, that just isn't the case. For most of us, once we decide we need to lose weight to be okay, Pandora's box opens up, and because in order to diet, we have to have some sense of food obsession and fixation, right? You have to start thinking about that stuff in order to get your calories right or your portion sizes or whatever. So automatically our mental energy starts going towards food and scaling and numbers and all of that, and creates this kind of like neural pathway that starts fixating on it, right? And we also have to start looking at our bodies because we're trying to make changes to them. So the fixation on the cognitive part with food, and then the fixation on our reflections and seeing how our bodies change or not, absolutely. So commonly it ends up with some pretty big problems for us, is the beginning of eating disorders very, very often. So what can happen after is that we might have that food obsession, and then we might start doing behaviors like restriction or binging or purging as coping mechanisms to avoid other mental health stuff, right? So somebody can avoid the pain of processing their childhood trauma by drowning those feelings out with an over control of food. Somebody else might learn that purging is a great way to release stress or difficult feelings that weren't safe to express in other ways. So to kind of sum this bit up, diets might seem innocent, but the residual consequences can be really dire and lead to years of the yo-yo dieting and cycling with weight and a huge emotional burden for us.
You said something in there that I think we need to stop and reflect on for one moment, because we hear a lot about people who have experienced trauma like overeat, but you're mentioning, which is very important for us to remember, it can also be the opposite. That control, that restriction is definitely a part of handling that trauma as well.
Good point, Sherry. Yeah, they absolutely can go both ways with it. Yeah. All right. So I'm pretty proud of this. It took me a little while to build. I'm a millennial and not a Gen Zer. And so this is my nifty little flow chart for how it tends to go. And this is kind of more based just anecdotally. It kind of echoes some of the other things that I've seen, but just anecdotally, this is the process that I see kind of unfold with it. So the things kind of start externally, right? So sometimes it's from family of origin. Often it's from family of origin that we start to get some of this messaging, which, and for a family of origin, it comes from the more external stuff, the systemic things, right? And probably their family of origin. So it starts on the outside, and then that stuff leads to more perpetuation of that same stuff, plus a strong dose of I hate myself, which is pretty common in teens. We know that. That's a really, really standard sort of self-view at that age. It's hard. They're looking for identities, and everything becomes subject to judgment from their peers. And so it's not uncommon at this age to see kids start disliking things about themselves. So that already being kind of a vulnerability, plus this other messaging that happens, they start to have more thoughts about their body that aren't very nice and bad feelings, and then some extreme behavior, because also teens are pretty impulsive and can do some pretty major stuff to try to change what they're not liking and to try to fit in with other kids. And so they'll do like some major restriction or something. But what happens is that our bodies don't want that, because it doesn't want to be at this lower weight. And so the more that we do that, the more likely they're going to bounce back up to some sort of overeating behavior to sort of mitigate and balance it out, right? But when that happens, it's not what we're supposed to do. And then we feel bad about that. And then the guilt and shame comes up again. And then the cycle just continues to repeat itself. So it's pretty brutal. Absolutely pretty brutal. And I wonder, Q&A with this, or thumbs up or what have you, has anybody found themselves in a cycle similar to this?
Yeah. Yeah. And also, has this come from your family of origin? Who experienced that? I personally remember my grandmother, every time we saw her, on Monday, I'm starting my diet, or she'd have a cookie. Oh, that's okay, because on Monday, I'm starting that diet. Always. And then my mom had that, and then I have that, and I am breaking the cycle now. So, yeah, it's a lot. Some of you did say, and this is about not family of origin, but kind of stories from your childhood. I still 40 years later hear my dance drill team coach telling me I'd be perfect if I could stay at that weight. I was 15 with zero muscle. Yeah.
Devastating.
And how much do these thoughts stem from trauma? That's family of origin. There's some from trauma, some not. Well, it depends on how you define trauma in that situation. Yes, my grandmother, mom, me cycle here too, working hard to fully break it for my kids. I'm with you on that one. I'm working hard. Mine was always, you're too skinny, eat more. I was not too skinny. Yeah. But just the comments, the thought, the focus on the body, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it sticks with us too. We're impressionable, especially when we're younger like that. So yeah, thank you everyone for sharing those examples. It's not okay. It shouldn't be that way. So hopefully we can all kind of together start to make it a little better. And Sherry, you mentioned you're already doing your work to break the cycle of that.
Working on it.
Really cool. Yeah. All right. What do we have next year? Okay, so there is some hope and optimism. So we'll get to that part. So we do have some evidence that there are more effective ways to manage and address our health that aren't going to be so harmful for us. So intuitive eating, has anybody heard of this?
Yes, you can give us a thumbs up. I have read a few books on this. It's this is the way. This is the way. That's all I can say.
Okay, we got some thumbs. Cool. All right. Great. Okay, so research does support this. Dietitians and nutritionists are now being trained in this model because we have a lot of research that's backing up the sustainability of this approach, the less harm being done for people, and it actually works long term because it actually isn't a diet for once. So that's good for everybody. All right, so these are the principles of intuitive eating. I'm going to try to kind of brush through these relatively quickly, but please let me know if anybody needs a question answered or clarification on this. Okay. First principle of intuitive eating is reject the diet mentality. Your sole purpose in life is not to lose weight. You do not always need to be on a diet or planning to go on a diet, or in 1 month, go on a diet, or on Monday. None of that needs to happen. Number 2, honor your hunger. Dieting makes us lose touch with our natural communication systems for hunger and fullness. We learn to tune out of this really cool natural system that's built into us, and we start to tune in to numbers and portions and shoulds, shouldn'ts, goods, bads, and all of that. And then naturally we just lose that really, really important system that's already there to tell us what we need. Okay, number 3, make peace with food. It doesn't have to be such a war all the time. Food isn't our enemy. Number 4, we want to challenge the food police. So we need to quit policing food as good and bad and right and wrong. Food is food, and everyone has different foods that make their bodies feel the best and that taste the yummiest to them. So it's okay. I like this principle a lot because it is really speaking to the moralization that's happened of food. This association of like, if we're eating a good thing, then we're good, or if we're eating a bad thing, then we're bad and naughty, right? And that leads to the shame. So we can see how that's all connected. All right, number 5, discover the satisfaction factor. All right, so this is what I want to know, and I'm sure everybody has gone through something like this. Have we ever tried to not eat something that really is sounding very good to us? And so we're trying our best to avoid it. And in the process of that avoidance, we end up eating like everything that is somewhat related to it.
Yes.
But not that.
Yes, 100%. Yes.
Until ultimately, what do we end up doing? We eat the thing that we wanted anyways, right? So the best way that we can approach this is just to give our bodies what it's asking for. And then you avoid the whole war with this. And you probably end up eating less anyways, because you're just satisfying what your body is asking you for. And I think, as I may have mentioned this, but just this idea I think is helpful, that as human beings, we want what we can't have the most, like always with things. So the more that we deny ourselves things, the more tempting they're going to be. So.
And if we're talking about this from a parenting perspective, think about this. If your son or daughter asks for, I want this Oreo, let's say, and you say, no, you can't have that, you've had dessert or whatever, they're gonna want that Oreo even more, and it holds that up on this like pedestal, like that is the thing that I need and want. And so now it was just, I want an Oreo, and then it's a craving, and just keeps going.
Yeah, that's such a good point, Sherry. Yeah. And hopefully these can be translated to parenting too, that we can just like implement this stuff, thinking about it for ourselves, and then how we would implement that for our teens as we're parenting and working with them about it. Because you're right, the Oreo gets a lot more clout when
Right.
First, yeah. Okay, so number 6, feel your fullness. We're going to use the hunger fullness scale to check in, which I'll go over next. When we're full, we can stop. We can come back. We can save it for later. We can toss it. We can give it to the dog. We don't have to be members of the Clean Plate Club anymore unless that's what our body actually wants. And again, this would just translate into the teens with these kinds of things too.
So if they ask, one example is if they're kind of done, we don't say, keep eating, you need to clean your plate, number 1. And the other side, if they want more, that we don't give them a hard time about it, we can just ask, are you full, or are you still hungry? And then, go with whatever their answer is.
Yes, exactly. Yes. All right. Number 7, honor your feelings without using food. So this is a little dicey because emotional eating really isn't a sin. It's fine. It's actually fairly useful compared to some other coping strategies that we might use. So we just want to have some things in addition to, like, sometimes if you get broken up with or something crappy happens, like a piece of cheesecake from the Cheesecake Factory is what you need, and it's going to make you feel a little better in that moment. And that's really not a problem. We just want to make sure that we have other coping strategies to address our feelings as well. So instead of calling Domino's when we know that we're stressed out, we call our friend that we've been meaning to reach out to. Or if we're tempted to keep going with the ice cream past the point of satisfaction, we want to write our thoughts and feelings down in a journal. So just having other options for it.
So let's bring this back to the parenting, because I know a lot of times what we want to do if our kids have had a really bad day, let's go grab some ice cream, or let's go get a pizza, right? Mm-hmm. So in that case, the way I would interpret this is, that's fine, but that's not all. Like, we can have the ice cream, and maybe that's because that's an opportunity to talk about it, that's why that is a good choice.
Absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate you, Sherry, for kind of redirecting this back to what that would look like with parenting. Yeah, super helpful. All right, number 8, respect your body. It is good. We are not born hating our bodies. The world has taught us to do that. So I will go into that just a little bit more later too. Number 9, enjoying exercise. We take the best care of the things that we love. So while we're not going to love our bodies every day, we can appreciate what they do for us. So when we at least have that respect, we're more likely to do active things that we enjoy because we enjoy them, and we choose to move our bodies from a place of care and not contempt. And number 10, honor your health with gentle nutrition. We can be mindful of balance in meals, but it doesn't have to be rigid anything. No. And then this is an example of a hunger fullness scale. These are used oftentimes in inpatient treatments for eating disorders, but I think they can also be really useful just in general. If we know, or we know that our teen has a hard time gauging their own hunger fullness scale or cues, we can use this as sort of a reference to check in with ourselves about it, to relearn that communication. And there's little labels on here to give ourselves a better sense of where we're at with it.
Now, this is something that you referenced before about learning to listen to your body when it's hungry or not. And so what happens with a lot of our kids, especially as they start to get older, is that when they're listening to the TikTok trends and they're trying to minimize their calories, all of this just goes away. It's not about what is my body saying? It's all about what are the numbers? How many calories have I had? Or how many pounds am I on the scale? So the other way we as parents kind of step in and get in the way of this is saying you need to eat now, you need to eat this much, you need to clean your plate, or you need to stop eating. So we disrupt this, don't we?
Yeah, thanks for saying that. Okay, I'm gonna pop over to the next. All right, so this next little bit is just a brief explanation of joyful movement. Can I get a thumbs up again on who has maybe heard this term before? Joyful movement. One thumb, one little thumb.
One lonely thumb. I haven't really heard of this. I have heard of moving for the sake of moving, but never really joyful movement. So I love it. Actually, really love it. But there's a comment here. Oh, someone wanted to know what numbers are the goal. What numbers are the goal on the scale? Not exactly sure what you're asking there.
I think I know what they're asking. What numbers are the goal on the hunger fullness scale, probably. So I think when I'm looking at this, I think like a 7-ish, 6, 5, 6, 7 is probably where we want to sort of look at. Again, I kind of have a hard time reading the actual words from this.
Yeah, so 6 says slightly full, satisfied, and light.
Yeah, yep.
That's what 6 is.
So 6, 7, 6, 7. I think that's about where we want to be with it. Satisfied and light or full. And once we're kind of moving outside of those parameters, we just want to check in with ourselves, see what's going on and what our bodies might need.
I like number 9, the urge for stretchy pants. That's a very good descriptor of that. Like when you're at the Thanksgiving table would be a time where that would be, coming into play.
The old unbutton. Have you ever? Oh yeah. Okay. So joyful movement. I just want to explain this just briefly. So it kind of goes back to this idea about enjoying exercise, because so many of us think that we need to go work out to make our bodies look a certain way, or we go work out because we don't like our bodies. And then this proposal, this joyful movement idea, is about us finding ways that we actually like moving our bodies. So if it's dancing, if it's swimming, if it's riding our bike, if it's hiking out in nature, something that we really do actually like, that isn't punitive. And this is something that you can encourage your kiddos to find too. Because if we're doing something that we actually enjoy, we're going to keep doing it more. It's far more likely that it's going to be sustainable. And activity, consistent activity is actually one of the best indicators of longevity, overall well-being, and health. So the movement piece is really important, and we just want to kind of be mindful of what the intention is with it. So
yeah, and so much more than just heading to the gym, just movement. Yeah, whether it's dancing, jumping on the bed, or walking the dog, playing in the backyard, skateboarding, doesn't have to be the gym.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so again, moving into the more hopeful place. So the goal of all of this is that all collectively we can work towards body liberation for all bodies and not just some bodies. Intuitive eating and joyful movement are shown to be sustainable ways to care for our bodies respectfully that actually lead to longevity and better health outcomes. So the rest of it is about eradicating the stigma, and what we call, so this is what we call the body liberation, freedom for all bodies, be they thin, fat, tall, short, black, brown, cis, trans, disabled, abled, whatever. Everybody is good, everybody is good, and everybody is worthy of respect. So I like this much better than the other ways. Okay. So this is going to be some more practical stuff to actually use with your teen. I asked the question in the beginning that was around like, did your kids see you when we had the body criticism happening? If that did happen, if they have seen you or they did see you at that time or have in the past, it is okay. You are not a bad parent. You are just a product, like all of us are, of what we've been told for forever and ever, that these things are so important. So Maya Angelou said, do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, you do better. So that's all we're asking with this. And when we have a better understanding of the origins of something, it makes it easier to dismantle it both internally and externally. So Q&A real quick. Does anybody remember the diet industry is a how many dollar industry?
Oh, billions. I just remember billions. 66 billion, 250 billion. What was it? 250?
66 billion.
66.
I would throw you a piece of candy if I had one. Yes, well done. So yep, diet industry is a $66 billion industry. And as I said before, nobody is born hating our bodies. Our culture taught us to do that. And we know this. I think this is a really kind of cute example. So if we think about how our kids act when they're little, right? Your little 4-year-old kid is not running around fixated on anything that's like just about their aesthetic, right? They're like running around and they're like, my kneecap is so cool. Like, look at this. It's so neat, right? And the little girl with her shirt and her tummy hanging out doesn't like go into the mirror and shamefully pull it down because somebody is seeing her tummy hanging out. So those things are very much learned, and we are not born that way with those kinds of insecurities. And thinking those things are important. So if it's learned, it means it can be unlearned, which is good news. All right. Let's see here. Do I have any questions right now, Sherry? I'm just about towards the end, so I want to check in.
No questions, but as a reminder, if anybody has questions, pop those in the Q&A so they don't get lost. We'll make sure that we answer this.
Okay. All right, so we want to find the utility of our bodies outside of their aesthetics. So what does our body do for us that has nothing to do with how it looks? So this can, again, all of this stuff hopefully can start with us and then translate to our kiddos. What we have a lot of, so not everybody has privilege because not everybody is able-bodied. A lot of us are. And that comes with some opportunities and things that our bodies do for us that are really necessary and important and valuable. And that makes them really important and special for us too. So outside of just how they look, they actually do good things for us. And so we want to be able to talk to our kids and we can ask that question. What does your body do for you that you appreciate, right? We want to remind them that our bodies, that our bodies can change and they're supposed to change. Like I said earlier, it'd be really concerning if everybody kept their prepubescent bodies. That wouldn't be good, right? There's this little idea I think is pretty important, but I'll try to go through it quickly. We have a set weight point, which means our body has a place that it naturally likes to be at. So we can notice, especially if we have a history of yo-yo dieting back and forth, we'll probably find that over time, our body sort of ends up back in this general space that's like 10 pounds on either side. So we call that a set weight point. Our body wants to be there, and our set weight points vary based on different bodies. So it's always going to try to go backward to where it's most comfortable. The other important part of this conversation is that having fat is different than being fat. So if your teen is in the mirror, or if you're in the mirror saying that I am fat, that's not necessarily true or fair, because there are people who self-identify in fat bodies who actually experience a lot of oppression because of this. So when they go to see the doctor, they're not given the same healthcare because they're automatically told that they need to lose weight. They're limited in seating options in places that they go. They're shamed and bullied and all sorts of stuff because of their size. So the community that self-identifies as fat is doing that as a descriptor that they're trying to neutralize. And that also has meant that there's been some marginalization and harm that's been done. So we can say that we have fat, but we need to be careful about when we're saying that we are fat, unless that's actually true in how we identify. So that's kind of a new thing for a lot of people. So any questions about that piece?
No questions coming in.
Okay, all right. So then this other part, with the self-critical talk that we discussed earlier, it becomes a very well-worn path. So when we think about something in a certain way over and over again, it's like driving in ruts in a road, and it's really hard to get out of those because we'll just naturally sort of come back to that same place where it's comfortable and our car likes to hang out, right? Our brains work the same way. So what's neat about it, though, is that we can get out of those ruts in the road, but it takes a lot of intention and practice. So we need to be deliberate, both again for ourselves and for our teens, about how we're talking about our bodies and how we're noticing that they're talking about our bodies. So just because they have this first thought, or we have this first thought that isn't very body kind, that's the automatic thought that we were taught, and we can come in with another thought that's different and more helpful for us. So it just takes practice with it. All right, and then my last little bit here is just some resources if anybody's interested.
Yeah, that first resource you have, I put that in the chat box. It's a fairly new book, and they're actually local, and it's about, as a parent, how to raise an intuitive eater. So it's got a lot of great advice. I'll put the name of it here again, but yeah, I love that you've got that on there because it's super important.
Yeah.
What is the Food Psych podcast? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
You know, I will be honest with you, Sherry, I don't listen to that one that often,
Okay.
but I know that there's a lot of people who enjoy this. I know that
Okay.
it's a body positive, intuitive eating, like anti-diet sort of approach.
Right. One question that I know not everybody probably will have heard of this, but is the haze.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that a little bit? Because I think it's important when people are reaching out, let's say that their child does need support on nutrition, that they are looking for that qualification, even for a pediatrician, or, you know, that I think that's important to know about.
Yep, absolutely. That's a great question. So most of the information that I shared comes from a health at every size sort of perspective. And essentially it's like a movement, I would say, a mission towards body liberation and to help eradicate fat phobia and weight stigma and really help people adopt these habits that research shows are more helpful for health in general and longevity. So the websites that are listed on the right top hand side there's one second down that's the asda.org. And that's where you will find a lot of the health at every size information. There's kind of this transitional thing that's happening right now because there was some flack that the health at every size creators got for building their platform from a place of privilege and not necessarily getting out of the way so the folks who are most impacted by it can be the voices for this. And so as does sort of the child of health at every size to sort of just make it better, make it more inclusive, make it what it should be. But they use still the health at every size principles. So all that's in that website, and you can find providers listed in there as well.
Excellent. Okay, so we are almost out of time. We did perfectly at 7:58. So we have 2 more minutes. If anybody has anything that they want to ask, you can just pop that in the Q&A. But meanwhile, I'm going to ask all of you a question. What is something that you can do like tonight, not tomorrow, tonight, to help yourself on this journey, which in turn, of course, helps your kids? Because when we can really begin to do the principles of intuitive eating, love and adore our own bodies, then that starts to break that cycle, and we can begin to hand down the healthy ways of seeing ourselves and adoring and let all this stuff go that we've been passing down for so many times. While people are putting that in the chat box, I will share with you a meditation I've been doing in the mornings. I have an alignment coach I'm working with, but there's one part of it that I love, and it says basically, I adore my body, or I think it's like a third person. How is it worded? Something like, I adore you, I adore your body as it is now, and thank you for the things that you do for me. So that's one thing I'm trying to embrace as I'm getting my clothes out, as I'm looking in the mirror, taking a shower, that I am taking that part of the meditation. And when I have that little negative thought, we're not going to be able to completely get rid of those thoughts. But what we can do is start to make that thought get quieter and quieter, and instead have the adoration thought come in like stronger. So that's what we want to start working on for ourselves, and that will naturally begin to be a part of our household and our family. Okay, here's a question for you. Can you talk a little bit about encouraging healthy body image for someone that feels they are too thin?
Okay. Ooh, that is such a good question.
Mhm.
Encouraging healthy body image for somebody who's too thin. So I think it would probably be the same approach that we would take with helping them feel validated, affirmed, and worthy outside of their appearance, right? So
Okay.
what other strengths do they have that are not appearance based? What else do they bring to the world that has nothing to do with how they look? What things in their life are important to them outside of how they look? And what does their body do for them outside of how it looks?
Yeah. It's such a great question. Thank you for asking that, because they said for a boy, if that helps. It's a great question, because we do often hear it from the one side, but not from the side of skinny. But this all boils down to the same thing of appreciating our bodies, listening to our bodies when we're choosing what we're eating, and letting that shame and guilt go to the side, right? So you have a boy who's skinny, and I know with the boy workout culture right now, they're talking about cutting, and then what is it, bulking and cutting, I think, is the two things they're talking a lot about. But it's hard, because not every boy, first of all, is going to ever be able to get super muscular, but also it's just everybody's body is different, so it's just so hard. But it's the same concept, right, Abby?
Absolutely. And if anybody's interested, that for boys, there's this book that was written by a fellow named Justin Baldoni, called Boys Will Be Human. And he is really doing a lot of beautiful work in that space towards, kind of more of a male audience for boys and men around different things that men deal with, and body image as absolutely one of them. This pressure to be a certain size and build these big muscles, and how challenging that can be. And so that can be a really helpful resource for that too, for that specific.
Yeah. I love this. I think I'll just share at dinner that I participated in this, and some things that I learned, the importance of knowing who you are outside of how you look. That's a great idea. And it's always helpful if you attend something like this, instead of going and lecturing your kids, saying, I went to this thing, I learned this. What do you think about it? So that you can start the conversation, instead of them going, oh my gosh, I'm going to get a lecture now.
Right.
They'll tune you out. So
can I
like
add
that
on to that, Sherry, real quick?
Mhm.
Just something real quick with this that I find useful with the teens that I work for. If you have a kiddo who's really resistant to these conversations and talking about they don't want to talk about their own experience with this, I find it's been really effective, just exactly like Sherry said, to plant these little nuggets that's like, oh, you know what I learned about this? How interesting. I thought that was so cool to learn about that. And I'd never thought about it that way. And instead of, putting them on the spot and asking them directly what they're struggling with their body image, it just gives this different perspective for them to start thinking about other ways that things could be.
Yeah. Great advice. Great advice. All right. We are at the end of tonight. It's 8:03. We did pretty well on time. I appreciate all of you for being here. And Abby, thank you so much for taking the time to come and speak to us and to share your knowledge. We're all going to walk away thinking about this a little bit differently and making some changes in our lives, I'm sure. As everybody is leaving, if you can give Abby some hearts, I'd appreciate that so she can see how much we love this and appreciate it. And also in the chat box, tell us either something you're going to do or something that was an aha moment for you so that we can kind of get an idea of what resonated with you. Right, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you at our next parent chat. And everyone have a great night and adore your bodies. Good night, everyone. And Abby, can you stop sharing your screen so I can put our in slides, please?
Yeah, how do I do that? There we go. Yes.